Next. Timber and other tree crops are listed as crop enterprises, and it can be great. You know, if you live in an area where timber regrows quickly, man, I'm a little jealous because it doesn't seem to grow as quick here in southern Idaho, maybe a little quicker in central Idaho. But it makes great firewood, nursery plants. If you have an existing timber stand on your property, you can do all sorts of interesting value-added enterprises. Landscaping, another really good enterprise to latch on to. I did come across a Christmas tree dilemma that's happening this year on the Christmas tree farms throughout the eastern part of the states. They are experiencing some root rot, and the quote from one of the guys was said that 11 years have gone down the drain. 11 years spent growing these particular trees to be cut for Christmas this season, and they're all dead. And so that's one thing that we have to kind of keep in mind about putting all our eggs in one basket. The diversity is critical. The diversity of species, diversity of varieties, and diversity of enterprises on the farm. Next. I have a couple more slides, and one is, it's supposed to say garlic on this particular slide, but I wanted to talk a little bit about one specific enterprise on our farm. And garlic, I thought, was a good example because, you know, it's one of our main cash crops. And looking at the market, the climate, soil, and water resources, the labor resources, the equipment, and we'll go right through it. Garlic has a really fantastic market potential. It's extremely shippable, very storable, easy to grow. It can be expensive to ship, but you can factor that into wherever your market is. I know exactly what I can sell my garlic for online, especially if it was certified organic, but I also know what I can sell my garlic for locally. I've done the research and I've talked to consumers, and we have a really great price point that we work off of. But let me tell you that they're not the same. Selling locally grown garlic at $10 a pound is not the same as selling seed garlic for $20 a pound. But you know, it's just something that fits into our whole farm goals. Culinary garlic is definitely cheaper to sell than seed garlic, but either way, you have to realize that there might be some regulations involved. If you didn't know, there is a garlic quarantine in southern Idaho and parts of eastern Oregon, basically anywhere that the Snake River runs, because the onion industry is so prevalent in southwestern Idaho and in eastern Oregon. There's a allium quarantine. So any garlic that is sold or shipped anywhere should be inspected by the USDA, or the Idaho Department of Ag is suffice in our area. And so it's really hard to get garlic shipped into Idaho. So it's one thing that you might want to check, and if any enterprise that you're considering, or what are those regulations that are involved. Another example is that in Idaho, we have an Idaho Bean Commission, and if you're thinking of growing edible fresh green beans or dry beans or any sort of bean, then know that you will be regulated by the Idaho Bean Commission. And in fact, it's really difficult to purchase bulk bean seed and have it shipped to Idaho. It's just one of our lovely industry-based regulatory options that we have to deal with that's designed for conventional agriculture. However, there are ways around it, but it's just something to consider when you look at your different enterprises. Climate, soil, and water. You know, garlic's really easy. It works great on drip irrigation. It likes loose, fertile soil. It hates competition. So that brings me into labor, where there's a lot of weeding involved. And you know, what we do on our scale, it's pretty labor intensive all around. It's all by hand. There's very little large equipment, but it's one thing that you need to take in consideration with something like garlic. Even if you do have equipment, there's a lot of manual labor involved throughout the whole production cycle. Next. And this slide actually should say CSA up at the top because I view our CSA as an enterprise in itself. We spend a lot of time on our CSA and sort of have designed our whole farm plan around it. And again, it's one of those enterprises that it's pretty complex, but definitely worthwhile. If you love talking to consumers, if you love networking, then a CSA is a really great option because aside from the growing is just such a small part of this form of direct marketing and this form of enterprise. The talking with consumers, talking with your customer is the biggest part. So if you don't like to do that kind of stuff, don't do a CSA. If you just want to show up at the farmer's market and sell great produce, then fantastic. You get to go home afterwards. But the CSA, you become really involved with your members over the whole course of the whole season. But know that there's multiple crops, so therefore you have multiple crop needs that you'll have to address. And members come and go. There's a lot of attrition, so you'll have to know your demographics of the area. Of course, we mentioned labor already. And then equipment. Mostly, I like to kind of highlight what is your post-harvest cooling and storage, because even on an acre of land, we harvested so much every week, often multiple times a week, and that was our biggest challenge: is where on earth do we put all of this food? Hundreds of pounds of vegetables every week. It's not going to fit in the refrigerator. So a walk-in cooler would be nice, but that's just something to consider when you're looking at your various enterprises. Next slide. I'd like to leave a couple minutes for questions, but I did want to point out that Roxbury Farm has been so generous and has posted many of their CSA guides online. So you can go to roxburyfarm.com. They have a 100-member CSA plan, different planting schedules, different delivery schedules, and so you can kind of check out what they do. And it can be really helpful. Obviously, please don't start out with a 100-member CSA. I mean, you'll have to slow down, but as you grow, you can kind of compare and make sense of those guides if you choose to do that. And then next. And finally, there's many other potential enterprises in terms of crops. Things that we've tried here are hops, and not necessarily for commercial beer production, but for our local home brew clubs, and they are looking for wonderful sources of hops, and it's something that we like to grow, and it's a pretty fun crop. So it made sense for honey and another really great one that can take a lot of time at first to get used to, but it's going to be really beneficial to have on the farm anyway in terms of beneficial insects. Mushrooms is another great potential enterprise, and the list could go on and on. And I think that's perhaps the last one. But ultimately, the bottom line is that, again, there's no single formula for what you can grow, but just make sure that it fits your farm goals and it fits what you want to do. I think Melissa summed it up with do what you love, and I would add to that, find what you love to do and to grow and jump in and do it, but just do it wisely, do the research, and then jump in. It makes a lot of sense that way. Thanks.
Melissa, do we have any questions for Jessica?
Okay, Jessica. Yes, one in particular. I know you mentioned that some of the heirloom varieties don't perform perhaps as well as you might need for a market garden situation, but one of our attendees asked, what's a good source for heirloom seeds if someone is interested in purchasing them?
Oh, great question. We grow many different varieties on our farm, and I would say, well, we're kind of careful about where we get our seed and pretty strong against supporting any companies that support GMO crops or the bad multinational corporations. So I would recommend Fedco Seed Supply, FEDCO. So just Google Fedco and they'll pop up. It's a cooperative, and they have a really great and pretty extensive supply of seed that you can source and know exactly where it comes from. Some of their seed comes from smaller growers throughout the United States. Some do come from bigger corporations, but they focus on not supporting those big multinationals like Syngenta and Monsanto. But if you're going to buy heirloom seeds, you'll probably have to pay a little bit more because they're sort of, I don't know, they're sort of like the hot thing, the hot item on the street these days in terms of agriculture. So you might have to pay a premium price for them, but once you get a few seeds, you can grow your own. A lot of those heirloom varieties, if you're careful with production, you can start saving your own seed and then have a great source throughout the years.